Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Kurt Vile titled Believe I'm Going Down. You know, I think I've been a little bit unfair to Kurt Vile in the past when I've covered him. See, when I covered his record Waking on a Pretty Days back in 2013, I was still very much in the learning curve when it came to album reviews. I didn't even have a proper camera yet, and finding an entry point to his woozy brand of half-stoned meandering indie rock was kind of tricky for me. I definitely found a lot to like about his knack for a solid hook, his fascination with smoky Americana, and his lyrics that knowingly walked the line between profound and asinine depending on what level of irony you operated on. But where I initially took issue, how it seemed like with every subsequent record, his textures are getting cleaner and more polished and losing some of the jangling momentum that he had brought when he used to be a member of the War on Drugs. Even though I'd agree that with most of Childish Prodigy and Constant Hitmaker that they were uneven albums, I did like the rougher edges on those records, and they had some of my favorite cuts of this guy's career. As such, by the time we finally reached the meandering and cleanest to date record Waking on a Pretty Days, I could appreciate a lot of the writing and some of the hazier melodies and the hooks, but the cleaner production just didn't really gel as well as I'd like, especially with some of the more tightly regimented electronic beats and pseudo-psychedelic textures. I missed the momentum and I missed the grit, and yet sometimes it seemed like with every single album we were losing that, so when I heard that Believe I'm Going Down is going to be even cleaner, I wasn't sure what we were going to be getting here or whether I was going to like it, especially with Buzz suggesting this album is going to be emphasizing even a bit more of an alt-country sound. So, okay, very different entry point than fuzzed out psychedelia and lo-fi indie rock. I can kind of work with that. I can appreciate it in a different way. So, what did Kurt Vile deliver here? Well, to some extent, he delivered exactly what you would expect from him. A meandering indie folk record with repetitious guitar licks that can be oddly hypnotic, spacey, half-coherent lyrics from Vile's lazy drawl, and the sort of textured, dusty atmosphere that can make those lyrics mean so much more in that context. And even if it is less dirty and gritty than the past, there is something potent behind the darker, fuller, more melancholic tones, even if what that actually is can be kind of difficult to quantify. It really does resist analysis in an anti-folk sort of way, if that makes any sense. So, okay, how do I really feel about this album? Well, let's start with Kurt Vile himself. And I have to admit, I've never been one that's been all that fascinated by his persona. Half-stoned earnestness, his mind seemingly on a different plane than the rest of his body, and with so much self-awareness, it can be tricky to discern whether or not he's being more actively sarcastic or ironic or just being sincere. I mean, I get the appeal. The same with that being the smartest guy in the room who always keeps his mouth shut for as long as possible, but it can wear a little bit thin when you realize that his nuggets of real wisdom don't really add to much or aren't that interesting. More on this in a little bit, but I think my bigger issue is that with every layer of vocal production and distortion peeled away, Kurt Vile really isn't a great singer. And sure, it's folk music, it's not like Bob Dylan was a great singer technically either, but whenever Kurt Vile jumps up into his upper range, it can sound like he's reaching for it, and it doesn't sound particularly good. Now granted, it's just me here, but I do think he could have been a little bit more polished here. It didn't sound like he was going that flat that often. Now granted, you're not coming to a Kurt Vile project for his vocals, you're coming for the instrumentation, the production, and the vibe and the atmosphere, where again, there's been some changes, but still a recognizable formula. Faded kick drums, sandy cymbals, layers of acoustic and electric guitars set up the squealing, textured arrangements, and often with one guitar providing that liquid or buzzing background for the songs to lend them that mistier, smokier sort of groove. Of Kurt Vile's catalog, this is probably one of the more sedate and melancholic projects, but that doesn't mean there aren't some great songs that can be mined from it. The low groove on Pretty Pimpin', it's got this infectious hook as we get a little bit more of that smoky texture. The introduction to that circling banjo progression on the alt-country tinge I'm an Outlaw, that's a great touch as it adds that ramshackle appeal to the song. The really deep kick drum on Wheelhouse as we get those layers of faded guitar, and the curdled acoustic darkness of Stand Aside, especially on that outro there. And then there's Wild Imagination with that sandy drum machine accenting an acoustic melody that I really did love until I realized that it was built from a near identical melodic foundation from 24 Frames by Jason Isbell, which was a much better song that came out this year. Putting that aside, the biggest changes come in the production. The mix is cleaner than ever, which allows the lower, more burnished tones to really add some great foundation to these songs, but at the same time it makes some of the buzzing synthesizers that occasionally fill out the background feel jarringly out of place, not blended as well as you might think. At best, they're just kind of quirky, and they just kind of fit the vibe. Like I lost my head there with the sounds of birds filling up the background with the synth burbling until it can just really fill up the second half of the song. But at worst, you get tracks like That's Life Though, almost hate to say, where the acoustic guitar squeals can mostly work against the percussion and some of those muted synthesizer notes until they all get a lot thicker and more prominent, and it doesn't really blend all that well. I should also mention the pianos, which I will admit strengthens the melodies, but the tone on those pianos is a little bit thin, a little bit dinky to me. They really aren't played as well as you'd think. And just like on Waking on Pretty Days, it all goes on about twice as long as it really needs to. Which honestly isn't that bad as it could have been, because the guitar work is great here, and the melodic licks and hooks do have a hypnotic quality. They can really suck you into that vibe, but they also don't really evolve or progress much within that vibe. And you kind of wish that Kurt Weill added a little bit more complexity to those guitar work. He actually sounds really good, those loops and the interweaving harmonies, but you just wish they could build on each other a little bit more on those extended instrumental outros. Now, this will take you all to lyrics and themes. And remember how I made the anti-folk comparison earlier? Over the course of Kurt Weill's career, he's made plenty of jabs at people who read way too much into his lyrics, when in reality, he's just screwing around, he's having fun, or he's very much in his own unique world. After all, it's why he finds his own brand of fulfillment, so why can't anybody else find the same in their own particular way? And even then, it could be argued that he's not really finding much there either, like on Lost My Head there. He doesn't hesitate to include himself in the same dazed and confused state as everybody else, but he's just kind of accepting it in his own self-deprecating way. It's clear that even he's laughing as he swaggers through some tracks. He knows it's a big put on, but that's just life. And tracks like Kiddin' Around are a direct reflection of how some would scan his lines for deeper meaning when he is just screwing around, where he almost wishes he could hear the deeper meaning that everybody's giving him, even though he realizes there's nothing that much that's deep there. As such, there's not really much lyrical analysis I'm inclined to do with this album, mostly because Kurt Weill's right in saying that it's hard to tell how much of it is a big put on, and that's impossible to prove it one way or the other. You know, if I were to guess, I'd say that the emotions are more authentic than they aren't, and I think that Kurt Weill looks for that on the cutting of the bullshit hookup on Dust Bunnies, or the mostly straightforward love songs Stand Inside, where he wants to get that person to understand him. But I argue those songs are more for the connection with that person than anything else. I get the feeling that Kurt Weill often feels alone, and he's looking for that connection, because when he's in his own world, he's trying to find a way to convey those bigger passions out of it. Like I Lost My Head there, where he's trying to lose his head and trying to convey those worlds when he's on stage, when he's singing them. He doesn't want to have to yell them. And then there's songs like Wild Imagination, where he's trying to force himself to look into that picture, but it's not really a picture, it's a video, but he's trying to hope that you can find that connection anyways, because why fake those emotions? It adds this album a certain amount of pathos, and I can't see Kurt Weill wanting to undercut that. But in the end, this is definitely a good album, but it's definitely overlong, underwritten, and doesn't quite have the momentum or progressions to be as memorable as I want it to be. I still appreciate Kurt Weill's unique brand of commentary, but I appreciate it a lot more than I like it per se. And his instrumental progressions might have some solid melodies, but he doesn't quite do as much with them as he could, and that does kind of irk me. As such, it's a light 7 out of 10 and a recommendation. I definitely get this guy's appeal. If you're looking for some good lethargic music, get good and stoned to, find your own pretty days, this is definitely an easy album to like, for as much as it's worth. But even otherwise, I don't know. Go check this out. You'll probably enjoy it. But yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else coming out that you want me to take a look at, or anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.